I used to think you could tell when something was about to fall apart. A clear warning, a sharp sign. It wasn't like that. It was a Tuesday too ordinary to deserve attention. I woke up before the alarm, around 5:40 in the morning. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the bedroom ceiling. Beside me, she was sleeping turned the other way. We had been sleeping like that for weeks. There was no fight, no conversation, no conscious decision. It just happened. I got up without making noise. The traffic to the office was the usual. At work, nothing went the way it should have. A serious mistake that wasn't mine landed on my desk. A meeting that could have been an email lasted a full hour. In the middle of the afternoon, I was called into a room everyone passes by and avoids looking into. The company president talked to me like I was an irresponsible intern. I listened. I didn't argue back. He said that one more mistake like that and I'd be fired. When I left that room, I decided to go home early. I drove on autopilot. When I got home, the street was full of cars parked any which way. One of them was partially blocking my garage. I parked a few houses down, walked back holding a folder. As I got close to the door, I heard voices inside the house. Loud laughter, everything normal, like it had happened before. My wife's best friend was there. I went in through the side, through the kitchen. I was about to cross into the living room when I heard my name. Not loud, not whispered. In that exact tone of someone who has no idea they're being overheard. I stopped immediately. Her voice came first, way too comfortable. She said she was tired of pretending, that she felt alive again, that ever since he had reappeared, everything felt simpler, more intense. The other voice asked the obvious question, what she planned to do now. There was a short pause. She said she was talking to a lawyer, said that the state we lived in split everything 50-50, and that she wasn't stupid enough to walk away empty-handed. She said it laughing, like someone commenting on the weather. I felt something strange in that moment. I thought about walking into the living room, thought about coughing. I did neither. I took 2 steps back, opened the back door with excessive care. I walked to the car, sat in the driver's seat without turning the engine on. I stayed there for a few minutes trying to remember when we had turned into that, when us had turned into a financial project. Disconnected flashes came back. Our simple wedding, the conversation about never needing any kind of contract, the way she used to say money didn't matter. I started the car and drove around until it was the time I usually got home. When I parked again, the house looked the same. Nothing suggested that something had ended, but it had. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. I went back inside that night. She was sitting on the couch, looked up when she saw me, smiled too fast, asked if my day had been rough. I said yes. She said she figured. We ate leftovers, reheated rice, dried chicken. We ate in silence, the TV on at a low volume that didn't really let you watch anything. She mentioned that she might go out over the weekend with a friend. I said it sounded like a good idea. At another time, I would have asked which friend. That day, I didn't ask anything. In bed, she turned to her side again. The same side, the side opposite mine. I thought about confronting her, thought about waiting for proof, thought about pretending I hadn't heard anything and seeing how far it would go. None of those ideas seemed smart. Over the next few days, I became an efficient version of myself. I functioned on autopilot. Woke up, work, quick kisses on the cheek. Her body felt more distant, but the naturalness of the betrayal was what scared me most. There was no visible guilt. There was planning. I started noticing details I had ignored before. The way she avoided looking when her phone vibrated. The outings that were too long for simple errands. The way she talked about money, with a confidence that didn't match someone who hadn't worked in years. One day she told me she was tired of working, that my money was enough for us to live well. I agreed. She quit her job and all my money ended up in her hands. At home, she did nothing. At night, when she went upstairs to shower, I'd sit at the kitchen table and think too much. About numbers, about laws, about lost time. I remembered what my father used to say when I was a teenager. After losing almost everything in a poorly explained business deal, whoever panics loses twice. I didn't panic, at least not on the outside. On Thursday that week, I got home a little after 7 in the evening. The house was empty, absolute silence. That's when the plan began to form. Nothing impulsive, nothing dramatic. I wasn't going to disappear like someone running from the police. On Friday, I called an old acquaintance who worked with investments. I spoke vaguely like someone thinking about diversifying. I asked about liquidity, about timelines. I wrote everything down in a notebook I kept hidden at the bottom of my work backpack. On Saturday, I suggested dinner out. She accepted with a strange enthusiasm. We talked like 2 polite people trying to imitate intimacy. At one point, she held my hand across the table. The gesture almost made me laugh. Almost. Sunday morning, while she slept, I opened the closet and started sorting things mentally. What was truly mine? What I could abandon without missing? What was just there taking up space? On Monday, during lunch, I went to a bank branch on the other side of the city. Nothing that would draw attention. I spoke to a manager too young to notice tension, asked generic questions, opened possibilities. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, opened the notebook. I wrote a single sentence: clean exit. I didn't know how yet, or exactly when, but I knew it wouldn't be with arguments, shouting, or lawyers fighting over percentages of my life. It would be in silence. Update 1. On Wednesday, I told her I might need to travel for work the following week. An emergency situation, nothing specific. She frowned for a second, then nodded too quickly. Said she understood. Said I was working too much. Said she was proud of me. I thought about asking if she'd miss me. I didn't ask. That night, I started separating documents. Not all of them, just the essentials. I made digital copies, erased traces, adjusted passwords. The plan wasn't complete, but it was no longer an idea. It was movement. And I knew that once the next step was taken, there would be no return to the man who walked into that house believing that splitting everything was fair with that woman. On Thursday, I woke up with a strange weight in my chest, like I was betraying someone who didn't yet know they were being betrayed. I got up at 6, made coffee, and stayed in the kitchen. She came downstairs shortly after, wearing one of my old t-shirts, the kind that turn into pajamas without warning. That almost broke me. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and mentioned that she might go out later. I said that was fine. My voice came out steady. That scared me. At work, I closed my office door for the first time in months, opened my personal investment spreadsheets, read legal terms, percentages, deadlines. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying not to be stripped by someone who had already left emotionally. At lunch, I sat alone in a small restaurant near the office. In the afternoon, I made calls I never thought I'd make. Cancellations, transfers, quiet adjustments. I didn't take everything at once. I did it in layers. I got home close to 9. She was on the couch, on her phone, the TV on some random channel. She asked if I wanted to order food. I said I wasn't hungry. I sat on the other end of the couch, far enough to seem casual. We talked about nothing. The weather, a mutual acquaintance, a movie we might watch someday. I nodded. She talked. At some point, she rested her head on my shoulder. That night, I went upstairs to the office after she fell asleep, opened a large suitcase on the floor. I took documents one by one: birth certificate, passport, old papers I barely remembered existed. I put everything into a hidden compartment in the suitcase, closed it. Around 1 a.m, the house was too quiet. That's when guilt decided to show up. Not for leaving, for lying. I wasn't leaving because I'd been weak. I was leaving because I'd heard too much. Even so, lying to someone I'd shared a life with hurt in a different way. I wondered if that made me worse than her. I wondered if there was some invisible moral scoreboard being updated somewhere. She was still sleeping. I watched her for a few seconds. I didn't feel hatred. I felt distance. That was more final. On Friday, I started saying goodbye without saying goodbye. I had lunch with co-workers, laughed at old jokes, made plans I knew I wouldn't keep, sent a message to an old friend saying only that I might need a favor soon. Nothing else. That night, I told her the trip would probably last a few days, maybe a week. She said she'd miss me. I packed 2 suitcases Saturday morning while she was out. Just the essentials, neutral clothes, a pair of boots I almost never wore, an old watch that belonged to my father. Nothing too sentimental beyond that. When I zipped the last suitcase, I felt something close to fear, but it wasn't exactly that. That night, I slept in the bed next to her for the last time without her knowing it. I left the house on a Friday too early to look like a goodbye. I kissed her cheek at the door, wished her a good week, said I'd call when I arrived. She smiled with that calm of someone already emotionally living at another address. I carried the suitcases to the car without looking back. Not out of courage, out of necessity. I drove for hours without a very defined destination. Took secondary highways, then smaller roads until my phone signal started to fail. I stopped at a roadside gas station around noon, ate a dry sandwich, drank bad coffee, then kept driving. By late afternoon, I stopped in a town too small to be in a hurry. One main street, a market, an old restaurant. I went in more out of exhaustion than hunger and sat at the counter. I ordered the daily special without asking what it was. While I ate, I overheard a conversation at the table next to me. An older man was complaining that it was hard to find workers, talking about people who quit after 2 days. The woman next to him listened in silence, stirring her coffee patiently. I waited until they finished talking and approached them, feeling slightly ridiculous. I apologized for overhearing and said that maybe I could help. The man looked me up and down, not hiding the evaluation. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, the posture of someone not easily impressed. I told the most honest version I could at that moment. Said I needed a place to stay, that I knew how to work. Said I wasn't running from the law, just from a life that had gone wrong. He stayed silent for a few seconds, looked at the woman. She gave a small nod, almost imperceptible. Then he said, I could try, nothing guaranteed, but he'd give me work and a place to stay. If it didn't work out, I'd leave without arguments. I accepted immediately. We drove separately for about half an hour. The long dirt road kicked up a lot of dust, making it hard to see. When we arrived, it was nothing luxurious. Everything was functional. He showed me a small building set apart from the main house. Said it would be my place for now. Inside, there was a simple bed, a table, a chair, a small bathroom. Clean, honest, more than I expected. That late afternoon, he took me around the land, spoke little, pointed out what mattered, where not to go, where to pay attention, where to help the next day. As he talked, I felt something strange growing inside me. No one wanted to know who I was, where I came from. They only wanted to know if I'd wake up early and do the work. That night, we had dinner together in the main house. Simple food, practical conversation. They asked almost nothing about my past. When I went back to the cabin, I thought about the woman I'd left sleeping in a bed that no longer felt like mine. Thought about the papers hidden in the suitcase. Thought about the money sitting in accounts that were no longer in the same place. I fell asleep fast, heavy. That's how a life that had nothing to do with me began, at least with the version of myself I thought I knew. The first day started before sunrise. There was no alarm clock. There was a knock on the door, firm, unhurried, at 5:30. I opened it still half asleep, and found the property owner standing there, hat already on, coffee in a thermos. He didn't say good morning, just said the coffee was in the kitchen and work started at 6 sharp. I put on the toughest clothes I had and followed him to the main house. His wife was already up, tidying the kitchen. We ate almost without talking. The other worker showed up shortly after, an older man, broad-bodied, face marked by sun and time. He shook my hand with enough force to measure character. That day's work was easy to explain and hard to do. Fences, posts, hard ground, heavy tools, no long instructions. I learned by watching and by messing up. My hands started hurting before noon. My back complained soon after. We had lunch sitting in the shade of a tree. Comfortable silence. No one asked why I was there. No one tried to be overly kind. At 6 sharp, we put the tools down, took care of the animals, washed our hands at an outdoor sink, ate dinner early. The conversation was practical, weather, next day's work, nothing personal. That night, lying on the simple bed in the cabin, my body ached and every muscle complained. On the second day, I woke up before the knock. We worked in another part of the property. More walking, more wait, less explanation. The older worker started talking a bit more. Late in the afternoon, the property owner passed by, watched my work in silence, and simply nodded. He didn't praise. He didn't correct. The following days followed the same pattern. Wake up early, work until the body hurt, eat well, sleep heavy. At night, sometimes I sat outside the cabin. At some point during the second week, for the first time since that cursed Tuesday, I went a full day without thinking about her. I'd been there long enough to forget that the place wasn't mine, long enough to think I'd gone unnoticed. That was naive. I was near the barn, adjusting tools, when I heard the sound of a horse approaching at a confident, unhurried pace. I looked up by reflex. Hair tied up carelessly, straight posture. The woman dismounted without asking for help, surveying everything like someone returning to territory she knew, but didn't fully recognize. When she saw me, she stopped. There was no greeting, no smile. She asked who I was and what I was doing there. Direct. I answered with the bare minimum, gave my name, said I worked there, added nothing. She frowned. She said it didn't make sense. Said her father was always complaining about not having money to hire more people. She said it looking straight at me. Something in me reacted badly. Maybe it was the tone. I replied too dryly, almost provocatively. Said that if she thought it was strange, she should talk to her father. The mood soured instantly. She got back on the horse without another word and rode off, leaving dust and an uncomfortable feeling in the air. I stood there holding the tool, feeling guilty for reasons that weren't yet clear. Later, during dinner, she showed up at the main house. Sat at the table like she'd always been there, but the dynamic shifted the second she entered. Her parents were visibly happy to see her. The older worker greeted her with long-standing affection. She didn't speak to me. Not a word, not a casual glance, nothing. I ate in silence. At some point, I heard my name mentioned by her in a conversation with her father. I didn't catch the full context, but the tone was questioning. Her father answered something firm, final. She didn't push it in front of everyone. That made me uncomfortable. I hadn't come there to cause family tension. I didn't want to be a topic. In the days that followed, our encounters were inevitable and always strained. In the stable, on the dirt road, near the house. She watched me like she was waiting for a mistake. I pretended not to notice, but I noticed everything. One afternoon, while I was working far from the main house, I saw her car approaching along the dirt road. She stopped near me and got out holding something. A simple paper bag. She said her mother had sent lunch and that I'd forgotten mine. Her tone was neutral, professional. I thanked her, nothing more. She stood there for a few seconds like she expected me to say something. I didn't. I started eating, staring at nothing. Before leaving, she asked, without looking directly at me, why I was really there. I could have lied, could have given a vague answer. Instead, I said something incomplete but true enough that I'd left a life that no longer worked and needed silence to reorganize my head. She nodded once, left. The next day, the older worker commented, not as a warning, just as something tossed into the air while we walked the land late in the afternoon. Said the herd seemed more spread out than usual. He said it looking into the distance. I didn't give it much thought. Animals move. Land is big. Things happen. But I started paying attention. The next day, while helping check fences, I noticed a stretch where the wire looked too intact, tight at the right point, firm posts, almost pretty, too pretty for something exposed to time and weather. At lunch, conversation was short. The property owner was quieter than usual. In the afternoon, we counted cattle in a more distant area. The numbers didn't add up, not missing enough to be obvious, missing enough to bother. I stayed quiet. It wasn't my place to raise suspicions yet, but I started noticing small things. Marks on the ground, improvised paths, spots where the vegetation looked trampled more than necessary. The mood changed without announcement. No meeting, no alarm, just a collective shift in behavior. More patrols, less carelessness, lower voices at the end of the day. The woman from the farm changed too. She started circulating more around the property, watchful. I saw her a few times standing still, watching the fields for long minutes. One cloudy morning, while we loaded tools into the vehicle, the property owner mentioned that years earlier he'd had problems with neighbors. Nothing serious, according to him. Just old disputes, crossed conversations, unresolved interests. He said it without drama, but the silence that followed revealed it wasn't that neutral. That night, I took a long time to fall asleep. It wasn't fear. I thought about how used to that routine I'd become, how it no longer felt temporary, and that scared me. The next morning, while walking alone through a higher part of the property, I noticed recent tire tracks where they shouldn't have been. Light marks, like someone had been careful not to leave too much trace. I followed them for a few meters and stopped. I turned back slowly, with the clear feeling that something was moving outside our field of vision. Something calculated, something patient. During dinner, no one mentioned anything directly. The morning, everything went out of control. The sky was too clear. I left early, a little after 6, to check a more remote area near a stretch of woods where the land narrowed, before dropping into a valley with running water. It was a beautiful place. Quiet. One of those spots that makes you forget there are people capable of ruining everything. I walked slowly, watching the ground, when I saw something that confirmed the unease of the past days. Fresh tracks. Not cattle. Horses. 3, maybe 4. The detail wasn't the mark itself, but the care. Someone had passed through trying not to leave too much evidence. Each step felt heavier than the last. The sound of water grew closer. That's when I saw her. She was near the water, distracted, unaware of what was approaching from the opposite side. 3 figures emerged from the trees, advancing with that dirty confidence of people who think they won't be stopped. There was no time to think about consequences, only decision. I shouted. The men froze for a second. It was enough. I grabbed the weapon I'd been carrying as a precaution since the mood had changed. I fired into the ground, far from them, but close enough for the message to be clear. They dropped to the ground. She screamed. I told her to get away, to leave without looking back. My voice came out firmer than I expected. She obeyed, mounted the horse in a hurry, hands shaking, and disappeared into the trees. I kept the men on the ground until I heard the sound of hooves approaching. Backup. The property owner and the older worker arrived armed, faces hard, understanding everything without long explanations. The men started talking, first denying, then one of them gave in, talked about planned theft, talked about pressure from an old neighbor, talked too much. Update 2. We took the men back under control while the property owner made the necessary calls. Law enforcement arrived late, as it always does in places like that, but it arrived, enough to keep things from ending worse. That night, we sat down to dinner in silence. She was pale, eyes down, hands restless. No one asked anything. As I was leaving, she called me by my name for the first time, not to thank me, not to argue, just to confirm that I was there. I went back to the cabin with the clear feeling that the beautiful place had shown its teeth. From that point on, I wasn't just someone passing through. The next day began strange, not heavy, strange. The police returned early, a little after 8. 2 cars, repeated questions. I told everything again, the same way, without heroics, without embellishment, just facts, times, what I saw, what I did, why I did it. The property owner stayed close through it all, calm, direct. His wife stayed farther back, observing. The older worker barely spoke. He didn't need to. We spent the rest of the morning fixing fences, like that was the most natural thing in the world after what had happened. Mechanical work. My head was still in the valley, in the sound of the shot, in her scream in the woods. She showed up near noon, walking slowly, without the horse this time, stopped a few meters from me. Her face still showed signs of a bad night's sleep, hollow eyes, rigid posture. She said thank you, just that, one word. There was no explicit emotion, but there was something more solid there, recognition. I said it had been nothing more than what needed to be done. Lunch was noisier than in previous days. Practical conversations about what would change, what would need more attention. In the afternoon, I helped the property owner with paperwork, simple things, signatures, reports. While we worked, he commented, almost in passing, that not everyone who arrives there ends up staying. He said it looking at the paper, not at me. I replied that I didn't know yet either. In the days that followed, the routine returned, but different. Less carelessness. She and I started crossing paths more. Not on purpose. It just happened. In the barn, on the dirt road, in the kitchen sometimes, too early for small talk. There was no invitation. There was a quiet, almost stubborn closeness, like neither of us wanted to admit it was happening. One night after dinner, the two of us stayed on the porch of the main house while the others went inside. She commented that it had been her favorite place since childhood. I said I understood. We stayed silent for a few minutes. She asked, without looking at me, if I planned to leave soon. I thought about the life I'd left suspended in another state. I said I didn't know. She nodded, said she didn't know many things lately either, and smiled differently. That night, when I went back to the cabin, I noticed something simple and unsettling. I was no longer counting days, or planning exits, admitting it wasn't an announcement. One day I woke up and she was in the kitchen with me before 6 in the morning, hair tied up carelessly, oversized t-shirt, drinking coffee like she'd always been part of that scene. No one commented. No one found it strange. The property owner just raised an eyebrow, exchanged a quick look with his wife, and kept talking about the weather. That's how it became clear we were together. In the days that followed, her hand finding mine in front of everyone. End of discussion. The past tried to trip me up a few times. Indirect messages came in, an insistent lawyer. I handled everything in the coldest, most correct way possible. No revenge, no exposure, no conversation with the person who had caused all of that, now firmly in the past. What needed to be divided was divided. What needed to be closed was closed. I didn't come out a winner. I came out whole. I didn't plan this future. I just stopped insisting on places where I had to shrink to fit. The shadow of my former life didn't disappear. Shadows don't disappear. They only lose power when you stop walking while looking back.